I'm Cassandra Mitchell Casey to everyone who knows me. I was 28 when my grandfather Harold took his final breath. As I clutched his wrinkled hand in the sterile hospital room, his eyes suddenly cleared. "Casey, how's the apartment?" he asked with a smile. I froze, confused. "What apartment?" "The inheritance," he whispered urgently. Nurses rushed in as his vitals spiked. "Find it." "Before they do," were his final words, as he pressed a strange key into my palm. Before I dive into what happened next, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop a like and subscribe if family drama gets your heart racing. Trust me, what I discovered after my grandfather's cryptic message changed everything I thought I knew about my family. The funeral was exactly what you'd expect for someone as wealthy as my grandfather. St. Matthew's Cathedral was packed with people in black, most of whom I barely recognized, despite sharing DNA. I stood near the front watching my relatives through my photographer's eye, categorizing their grief into genuine and performative. Aunt Pamela, my grandfather's only daughter, sobbed dramatically into a handkerchief. Her mascara remained perfectly intact. Uncle Richard, her husband, kept checking his phone, his tall frame stiff in an expensive suit. My cousin Stephanie, Pamela's daughter, alternated between dabbing at non-existent tears and subtly taking selfies with the flower arrangements. Only my cousin Brandon seemed genuinely affected, his shoulders hunched as he stared at the ornate casket. Photography had been my escape from family drama. While everyone else fought over holiday dinners and inheritance prospects, I built a modest career capturing other people's happiest moments. Grandpa Harold was the only one who supported my choice, secretly funding my first professional camera when my parents insisted I get a real job. The rain started just as we left the cemetery, as if the weather wanted to add one final dramatic touch. Everyone hurried to their cars, heading to my grandfather's sprawling mansion for the reading of the will, the moment they'd all been waiting for. Miss Mitchell, Mr. Bennett, my grandfather's attorney, gestured for me to join him in Harold's wood-paneled study. "The family is gathering." The room fell silent as I entered. Aunt Pamela sat imperiously in Grandpa's leather chair, while Uncle Richard loomed behind her like a bodyguard. Stephanie preened by the window, the perfect light highlighting her expensive highlights. "Let's proceed," Mr. Bennett said, adjusting his glasses. "As executor of Harold Mitchell's estate, I'll read his final wishes." The atmosphere was thick with anticipation. My relatives leaned forward slightly like greyhounds waiting for a race to start. "To my daughter Pamela, I leave my vacation property in Aspen and associated holdings." Aunt Pamela nodded stiffly as if this was merely her due. "To my grandchildren, Stephanie and Brandon, I leave trust funds of $500,000 each to be administered by Mr. Bennett until they reach the age of 35. Brandon looked relieved. Stephanie looked outraged at having to wait for her money. "And now for the primary estate, including the family home investment accounts and business holdings." Everyone tensed. I absently fingered the strange key in my pocket. "These assets will remain frozen, pending the resolution of a special condition." The room erupted. "What condition?" Pamela demanded, her face flushing. Mr. Bennett looked directly at me. "Harold has left a specific task for his granddaughter Cassandra. Until that task is completed, the bulk of the estate remains in trust." All eyes turned to me. I felt my throat go dry. "What task?" I whispered. Mr. Bennett handed me a sealed envelope. He left specific instructions that only you should receive this information. Uncle Richard stood abruptly. "This is preposterous." Casey barely visited him. Richard, Aunt Pamela hissed, placing a manicured hand on his arm. With trembling fingers I opened the envelope. Inside was a single sheet of paper with my grandfather's familiar handwriting. "Remember our Sunday afternoons, little bird. The key opens where memories live. Trust no one until you understand everything." "What does it say?" Stephanie demanded, trying to peer over my shoulder. I folded the paper quickly. "Just personal instructions." As the family argued with Mr. Bennett, I slipped out of the study, needing air. In the hallway, I overheard Aunt Pamela's hushed voice from around the corner. "This is ridiculous, Richard. That girl doesn't deserve to control this family's future. Don't worry, Uncle Richard replied. We'll handle the situation. I've already made calls. I backed away silently, my heart pounding. Whatever my grandfather had left me, my family was already plotting to take it away. I clutched the key tighter and headed for the door, knowing I couldn't trust anyone in that house. Back in my apartment, I examined the key again. It was old-fashioned, made of tarnished brass, with an unusual pattern on the head, 3 connected circles. The clue about where memories live had to reference something from my childhood. I spread out on my living room floor, surrounded by old photo albums I'd retrieved from my storage unit. Grandpa Harold and I had spent countless Sunday afternoons looking through these together, him telling stories while I practiced photography on his vintage Leica. Remember our Sunday afternoons, little bird, I murmured, flipping through the pages. Around 2 a.m. I found a photo I'd taken when I was 12. My grandfather stood in front of an unfamiliar brick building, smiling proudly. On the back, in childish handwriting, Grandpa's secret place, 1224 Westmore Avenue. I'd completely forgotten taking this. The next morning I Googled the address, discovering it was now a luxury condominium building called the Westmore in the historic district. According to the building's website, it had been renovated 10 years ago from a 1,922 apartment building. After changing clothes 3 times, I finally decided on something professional: black jeans, a blazer, and minimal makeup. I needed to look like I belonged in an upscale building. The Westmore was even more impressive in person, with an ornate limestone facade and gleaming brass doors. Inside, a doorman nodded politely as I crossed the marble-floored lobby. "Can I help you?" The man behind the front desk wore a nameplate reading Thomas. "I hope so," I said, summoning confidence. "I'm looking into a property that might have belonged to my grandfather, Harold Mitchell." Thomas's eyebrows shot up. "Harold Mitchell? Of course I remember Mr. Mitchell." "You knew him?" I asked, surprised. "He was one of our last original deed holders," Thomas explained, suddenly animated. "When the building converted to condos, he refused to sell. Kept his unit on the top floor. Haven't seen him in a couple years, though." I took out the key. "Would this open his apartment?" Thomas examined it. "That's definitely one of our originals. Do you have proof you're related?" After showing my ID and a copy of my grandfather's death certificate, Thomas escorted me to the elevator. 5th floor, end of the hall. "I'll need to accompany you the first time, building policy." The hallway was plushly carpeted with sconces casting a warm glow. At the end stood a door with tarnished brass numbers, 506. My key slid in perfectly. The door swung open to reveal a time capsule, a spacious 1-bedroom apartment filled with mid-century furniture, every surface covered with a decade of dust. "I'll leave you to it," Thomas said. "Just let me know when you're done." Alone in the apartment, I felt my grandfather's presence strongly. The place smelled of old books and his favorite pipe tobacco. Framed photographs covered one wall, many showing much younger versions of my family members. My phone buzzed with a text from Brandon. "Need to talk. Family going crazy about Will's situation." I hesitated, then responded, "What's up?" "Aunt Pamela on Warpath. Might have info that could help you. Coffee tomorrow." Despite my reservations, I needed information. We agreed to meet at a cafe near the apartment building. The next morning, Brandon arrived, looking disheveled, his usually perfect hair uncombed. "They're talking about challenging the will," he said without preamble. "On what grounds?" I asked. "Mental incompetence. Uncle Richard has a psychiatrist friend willing to testify Grandpa wasn't in his right mind." I felt sick. "That's ridiculous." Brandon leaned forward. "What exactly are you looking for? Maybe I can help." Something in his eagerness made me wary. "Just some family mementos," I lied. "Well, I found something interesting," Brandon said. "Grandpa had a safe deposit box. I have a copy of the key. We could check it together." "How did you get a key?" I asked, suspicion growing. Brandon shrugged. "Mom hid it in her desk." I made a non-committal sound. "Let me think about it." After our awkward coffee, I rushed back to the Westmore. Something felt off about Brandon's sudden helpfulness. I found the apartment door unlocked. Inside, chaos greeted me, furniture, overturned cushions, slashed books scattered everywhere. Someone had systematically torn apart every possible hiding place. Grabbing my phone, I called Thomas, who arrived minutes later with the building security guard. "This is outrageous," he spluttered. "We have security cameras in all hallways. Let me pull up the footage." In the building's security office, we watched grainy footage from that morning. The timestamp showed 10:05 a.m. right when I was meeting Brandon. The camera captured two figures in the hallway, Brandon using a key card to let someone in. The second person wore a baseball cap pulled low, but I recognized the designer handbag. "That's my cousin Stephanie," I said flatly. "Would you like to file a police report?" Thomas asked. I thought quickly. Not yet. But I'd appreciate if you changed the locks. I had trusted Brandon and he had betrayed me. Worse, he'd been working with Stephanie all along. Whatever my grandfather wanted me to find, my family was determined to get to it first. As I rode the elevator down, my phone dinged with a text from Brandon. "How was coffee? Found anything interesting yet?" I didn't respond. From now on, I was on my own. The next morning, I returned to the apartment with determination and cleaning supplies. If I was going to find anything, I needed to approach this methodically, like a photography shoot, organized, deliberate, and attentive to detail. Despite the ransacking, I doubted my cousins had found what they were looking for. My grandfather was too clever to make it easy. I started in the living room, carefully documenting everything with my camera before touching it. The bookshelves held an eclectic collection: engineering textbooks, spy novels, and history books focusing on the Cold War era. Inside several books, I found newspaper clippings about technological innovations from the 1970s and 80s. The bedroom yielded nothing unusual. The kitchen cabinets held only dusty dishes and canned food long past its expiration date. In the bathroom, I found prescription bottles with my grandfather's name, all for heart medication. By mid-afternoon, I was losing hope. I sat on the floor of the bedroom closet, surrounded by old suits and shoes, feeling defeated. Then I noticed something odd about the closet's back wall. The baseboard didn't quite meet the wall in one corner. Investigating closer, I found it could be pulled away slightly. Behind it was a small lever that, when pulled, released a hidden panel in the closet wall. My heart pounded as I shined my phone's flashlight into the revealed cavity. Inside was a wall safe, not a modern one, but an old-fashioned combination lock safe that might have been installed when the building was first constructed. The key I had wouldn't work on this. I needed a combination. Next to the safe was a stack of folders. I carefully removed them and brought them to the living room. Inside were more newspaper clippings, photographs, and what looked like technical documents, many stamped confidential or classified. One photograph showed my grandfather in a military uniform I didn't recognize, standing with a group of serious-looking men in front of a nondescript government building. The caption read, "DARPA Special Projects Division 1978. I'd always known grandfather worked in technology before founding his company Mitchell Innovations, but he'd never mentioned government work. The technical documents contained diagrams and equations beyond my understanding, but they appeared to relate to some kind of energy storage system. Among the papers was a business card for Rachel Wilson, special investigator, retired, with a phone number. On the back, my grandfather had written, "Trustworthy, if necessary." This was getting beyond my ability to understand alone. I needed help from someone with knowledge of this era and type of work. My friend Megan from college worked as a research librarian specializing in technology history. I texted her asking if we could meet. The next day, Megan peered at the documents in her office at the university library. "Casey, this is fascinating," she said, examining a diagram. "Your grandfather appears to have been working on classified energy technology in the late 70s. Look at these dates. This was during the energy crisis." "What does it mean?" I asked. "I'm not entirely sure," she admitted. This is beyond my expertise, but I know someone who might help. She pointed to the business card I'd found. Have you called this investigator? I hadn't still cautious about involving strangers. Rachel Wilson was a pretty well-known intelligence investigator, Megan continued. She worked on technology security cases in the 80 seconds and 90 seconds. If your grandfather knew her, she might have valuable context. That afternoon I called the number on the card, half expecting it to be disconnected. To my surprise, a brisk female voice answered. Wilson speaking. My name is Casey Mitchell. My grandfather was Harold Mitchell. I found your card among his things. A long pause followed. Harold's dead then. Last week I confirmed. Another pause. You better come over. Bring whatever you found. Rachel Wilson lived in a modest townhouse in a gated community outside the city. She was in her 70s with short silver hair and alert eyes that missed nothing. Her living room walls held photographs of her with various government officials and military personnel. After examining my ID, she gestured for me to sit. Your grandfather and I worked together on sensitive matters. What exactly did he leave you? I explained about the key, the apartment, and the hidden safe. Rachel examined the documents I'd brought, her expression growing increasingly grave. Harold was one of the brilliant minds of his generation, she said finally. He developed energy storage technology that was decades ahead of its time. Is that what made him wealthy? I asked. Rachel laughed sharply. No. What made him wealthy was patenting a much less revolutionary version and selling it to the private sector. The real breakthrough, she tapped the documents, this he kept secret. Why? Because certain entities wanted to suppress it. It would have disrupted the entire energy sector, made a lot of powerful people very unhappy. I thought about my family's desperation to find whatever my grandfather had hidden. My aunt and uncle. Pamela always resented her father's principles, Rachel interrupted. She and that husband of hers have been trying to get control of Harold's research for years. He must have finally gotten worried enough to set up this contingency plan with you. But why me? I asked. I'm not a scientist. I don't understand any of this. Rachel studied me. Harold talked about you. Said you were the only one in the family who inherited his moral compass instead of just waiting for his money. She handed back the documents. These people won't stop, you know. If there's something valuable hidden in that apartment, they'll do whatever it takes to find it. As if to punctuate her warning, my phone dinged with an email notification. It was from my biggest photography client canceling our contract due to concerns about reliability. Another email showed a message from my landlord about complaints from neighbors. They're going after your reputation and livelihood, Rachel observed, watching my face. Classic intimidation tactics. What do? I asked, feeling overwhelmed. You need protection for yourself and whatever information you find. She stood up, retrieving a business card from a desk drawer. This is my son Michael. He's a cybersecurity specialist. He can help secure your communications and digital footprint. I took the card, grateful but still processing everything. As I prepared to leave, Rachel placed a hand on my arm. Be careful, Casey. If Harold hid something valuable enough to set up this elaborate scheme, it's worth a lot to someone and potentially dangerous. Driving home, I was so distracted I nearly missed the car that had been following me since leaving Rachel's neighborhood. When I pulled into my apartment complex, it drove past slowly. Inside my apartment, the sensation of wrongness hit me immediately. Nothing was obviously disturbed, but small things were off. A drawer, not fully closed, my laptop at a slightly different angle than I'd left it. Someone had searched my home. On my kitchen counter lay a plain white note card with a typed message. Stop looking. Final warning. I packed a bag with essentials, grabbed the documents, and left immediately. Whatever my grandfather had hidden, it was clear I couldn't trust anyone in my family, and now I couldn't even feel safe in my own home. 3 days after finding my apartment compromised, I received a text from Aunt Pamela. Family dinner tonight, 7 p.m. Important matters to discuss civilly. The address was for an upscale restaurant downtown. Don't go, Rachel advised when I called her. It's obviously a trap. But what if I can learn something? Find out what they know. I was staying at a hotel paid for in cash using a burner phone Rachel had provided. If you insist on going, we're taking precautions, she said firmly. That evening, Michael Wilson, Rachel's son, drove me to the restaurant. In his early 40s with his mother's shrewd eyes, Michael had spent the last 2 days securing my digital life and teaching me basic counter-surveillance techniques. I'll be at the bar, he said, adjusting an unobtrusive earpiece he'd given me. If anything feels wrong, use the code word photograph and I'll create a distraction. Inside the private dining room, my family waited like actors positioned for a scene. Aunt Pamela sat at the head of the table, Uncle Richard at her right. Brandon and Stephanie flanked the other side, both looking uncomfortable. Casey, darling. Pamela's voice dripped with false warmth. We were beginning to worry. I took the only remaining seat at the opposite end of the table, facing Pamela directly. What's this about? We're concerned about you, Richard said, his corporate lawyer voice in full effect. You've been acting erratically since Harold's death. A server appeared with wine and appetizers. I noticed everyone already had full glasses. I'm fine, I said, leaving my wine untouched. Just processing grief. Of course you are, Pamela said soothingly. We all are. That's why family should come together during difficult times. Throughout the appetizer course, the conversation remained superficially pleasant, questions about my photography, comments about the food. But underneath ran an electric current of tension. As the main course arrived, Pamela finally got to the point. Casey, we're worried this treasure hunt Harold sent you on is causing unnecessary stress. We just want what's best for the family, Richard added. This division of assets is creating tension when we should be supporting each other. What do you suggest? I asked, keeping my voice neutral. Sign over whatever authority Harold gave you, Richard said bluntly. Let us handle whatever he was working on. We'll ensure you're compensated fairly. We're better equipped to manage complex business matters, Pamela added. You can focus on your photography. The way she said photography like it was a child's hobby made my temper flare. I'm handling things fine, I said firmly. Are you? Stephanie spoke for the first time, her voice silky. You look terrible, Casey. We're worried about your mental health. My mental health is excellent, thank you, I replied, gripping my napkin under the table. Casey, Pamela leaned forward suddenly, all concern. We know Harold had episodes in his later years. Paranoia, hiding things, making up conspiracies. What are you talking about? I demanded. Grandpa was sharp as a tack until the end. Richard cleared his throat. We've been speaking with Harold's doctors. They had concerns about his cognitive state for some time. Pamela reached into her designer handbag and pulled out a folder. We've prepared some paperwork, just as a precaution, for your protection. She slid the documents across the table. The words petition for conservatorship leaped out at me. You want to declare me mentally incompetent, I said incredulously. To get control of whatever Grandpa left me. It's for your own good, Richard said smoothly. Your behavior lately disappearing, missing work commitments, paranoid accusations about your apartment being searched. How do you know about that? I interrupted sharply. I never told any of you. An uncomfortable silence fell. Brandon mentioned it, Stephanie finally said, not meeting my eyes. I turned to my cousin. Brandon. He looked miserable. I was worried about you. We tried this approach with Harold too, you know, Pamela said, her voice hardening. He refused help, became increasingly paranoid, hiding his research, making wild claims about corporate espionage. We're trying to prevent you from going down the same path. The pieces suddenly clicked. You had Grandpa declared incompetent. That's why he was in that care facility, not because of his health. The doctors agreed he needed supervision, Richard said. Just as they'll agree you need guidance through this difficult time. I'm leaving, I said, standing up. Don't contact me again. If you walk out now, Pamela called after me, we file these papers tomorrow. Your choice. In the lobby, I found Michael already waiting, having heard everything through the earpiece. "Photograph," I said shakily. "Let's get out of here." As we drove away, I spotted Uncle Richard on his phone watching our departure. "They're trying to do to me exactly what they did to Grandpa," I said, still processing the revelation. They had him declared incompetent to get control of his research. "That explains a lot," Michael said grimly, "including why they're so desperate now. If Harold managed to hide his most valuable work before they gained control, they need to find it before anyone else does." 10 minutes from the hotel, I noticed headlights following too closely. "I think we're being tailed." Michael took evasive action, making several quick turns. The car behind matched our movements exactly. "Hold on," he warned before executing a sharp turn down an alley and cutting the lights. The pursuing vehicle shot past. For a moment I glimpsed the driver, Uncle Richard's personal assistant. We took a circuitous route back to Rachel's house instead of the hotel. As we pulled into her driveway, my car's maintenance light flashed on my phone, an app Michael had installed to monitor my vehicle remotely. "Someone's tampered with your brake lines," he said, showing me the alert. "If you'd driven home from that restaurant." I stared at the screen in horror. This wasn't just about money anymore. My family was willing to risk my life to get what they wanted. "You're staying here tonight," Rachel declared after hearing our story. "Tomorrow we figure out how to access that safe. This has gone far enough." That night I lay awake in Rachel's guest room, scrolling through messages from clients, canceling contracts, friends, referencing rumors about my breakdown, and a notice from my landlord about lease violations. My family had systematically attacked every aspect of my life in just a few days. They had done the same to my grandfather, isolated him, declared him unstable, and locked him away. The thought of it made my blood boil. I'd lost my home, my income, and my reputation. But I still had my grandfather's trust and whatever secret he deemed important enough to protect. Tomorrow we would find it before my family's desperation led to something worse than cut brake lines. "Focus on what we know, not what we don't," Rachel said the next morning, spreading documents across her dining room table. Michael sat beside me, laptop open, running searches on my family members. Harold was developing energy storage technology for DARPA in the late 1970s, Rachel continued. Something revolutionary enough that certain interests wanted it suppressed. He created a less advanced version that made him wealthy but kept the breakthrough research hidden. "My family wants that research," I added. "Badly enough to have Grandpa declared incompetent, and now to try the same with me. And they're willing to resort to dangerous tactics," Michael noted, gesturing to the alert about my tampered brakes. "We need to understand why they're so desperate right now specifically." He turned his laptop toward us. "I did some digging into your family's finances. Mitchell Innovations, the company your grandfather founded that your uncle now runs, is in serious trouble." The screen showed financial reports and news articles. Mitchell Innovations' stock had plummeted over the past year. "They've fallen behind competitors," Michael explained. "No significant new patents in 5 years. Meanwhile, your aunt and uncle maintain an extremely lavish lifestyle." He clicked to another screen. "Stephanie maxed out 3 credit cards in the last month alone. Your family is cash rich but asset poor. They've been living on your grandfather's reputation and past successes, so they need Grandpa's hidden research to save the company," I asked. "Or to sell to the highest bidder," Rachel said grimly. "Either way, it explains the urgency." Michael kept typing. "There's something else interesting. 2 days after your grandfather died, Richard had meetings with executives from Axiom Energy." "Axiom?" Rachel looked alarmed. "They're one of the largest energy conglomerates in the world and notorious for absorbing smaller companies and their patents." "You think Uncle Richard is planning to sell whatever Grandpa hid?" I asked. "It would solve their financial problems instantly," Michael confirmed. "But they need to find it first." I pulled out the photos I'd found in the hidden compartment. "These might help us understand what we're looking for." We examined the images my grandfather, with various scientific teams standing in front of laboratory equipment I didn't recognize. Wait, Rachel said suddenly, pointing to one photo. I know this man, Dr. Alan Foster. He worked with your grandfather at DARPA. Is he still alive? I asked hopefully. Last I heard, yes. Retired in Arizona. She reached for her phone. I'll see if I can track him down. While Rachel made calls, Michael helped me set up security measures, a new email address, secure messaging apps, and privacy settings on all devices. Your family managed to compromise a lot of your personal information, he explained. They likely hired professionals. They're spending money, they don't have to find whatever Grandpa hid, I observed. It must be incredibly valuable. Or dangerous in the wrong hands, Michael added quietly. By afternoon, Rachel had located Dr. Foster, who agreed to speak with us via secure video call. The man who appeared on screen was in his 80s with a shock of white hair and alert eyes behind thick glasses. Rachel Wilson, he said with a smile. It's been a long time, and this must be Harold's granddaughter. Thank you for speaking with us, Dr. Foster, I said. I'm trying to understand what my grandfather was working on, and why my family is so desperate to find it. Dr. Foster's expression grew serious. Harold Mitchell was a genius, truly ahead of his time. We worked together on what we called Project Prometheus, an energy storage system that could have revolutionized how we power everything from homes to vehicles. What made it so special, I asked. Efficiency, he replied, simply. Our prototype achieved nearly 90% energy retention over extended periods, decades ahead of anything else. But more importantly, it could be produced using common materials at relatively low cost, which threatened existing energy infrastructure, Rachel added. Precisely, Dr. Foster nodded. When certain interests realized the implications, there was enormous pressure to classify the research and shelve it indefinitely. Harold refused, argued the technology belonged to humanity, not corporations or governments. What happened? I prompted. A compromise. Harold agreed to develop a less efficient version for commercial use, which made him wealthy. But he secretly continued refining the original technology, determined that someday it would be released. And now my family wants to sell it to Axiom Energy, I said. Dr. Foster looked alarmed. That would be disastrous. Axiom would bury it forever. They've built an empire on controlling energy access. Do you have any idea what we should be looking for? Michael asked. Physical research prototypes. Knowing Harold, he would have secured the complete patents and technical specifications, Dr. Foster said. Possibly prototype designs as well. Enough that someone could reproduce the technology without him. After ending the call, we sat in silence, processing this information. We need to find that safe combination, I said finally. Everything points to the apartment. I might be able to help with that, Michael offered. I've got equipment that could potentially crack it. First, we need to secure the apartment, Rachel countered. Your family already broke in once. They'll try again. We developed a plan. Michael would set up discreet surveillance on the apartment while we researched potential combinations for the safe. Rachel would use her connections to investigate Axiom Energy's recent activities. As evening fell, Michael and I prepared to return to the apartment building to gather more information. I've been thinking about what your grandfather said in his final moments, Michael said as we drove. About finding it before they do. Dr. Foster's information suggests your family might not be the only threat. You think Axiom might be involved directly? I asked. It's possible. Companies like that have resources to monitor potential technological threats. If they knew your grandfather was hiding something valuable, the thought sent a chill through me. I'd been focused on my family's betrayal, but the situation might be even more complex and dangerous. At the Westmore Thomas, the building manager greeted us with evident relief. Miss Mitchell, I was worried when you disappeared after the break-in. I needed some time to regroup, I explained. Thomas, this is my friend Michael. He's helping me with security concerns. Thomas lowered his voice. I should mention your relatives have been calling daily demanding access to the apartment, claimed they're helping you clean it out. I've refused without your explicit permission. I thanked him for his discretion, then hesitated. Thomas, how long have you worked here? Almost 15 years, he replied proudly. Did you know my grandfather well? Mr. Mitchell was a fixture here. Came by monthly like clockwork until his health declined about 2 years ago. This confirmed what I suspected. My grandfather had maintained the apartment even after being placed in the care facility. Did he ever mention what he kept here? Or why it was important to him? Thomas thought for a moment. Not specifically, but he always checked the hidden security system when he visited. My heart jumped. Hidden security system? Yes, built into the wall panel by the bookcase. Very sophisticated for its time. He installed it decades ago. Said it would alert him to unwanted visitors. Michael and I exchanged glances. This could be crucial information. Could you show us? Michael asked. Upstairs, Thomas demonstrated a sequence of taps on what looked like an ordinary wall panel. A small digital keypad slid out. Mr. Mitchell would enter a code here. Said it controlled additional security features throughout the apartment. Do you know the code? I asked, hopefully. Thomas shook his head. He never shared it. Very private about such things. After Thomas left, Michael examined the system. This is vintage tech but innovative. Your grandfather was security conscious decades before it became common. Could the security system be connected to the safe somehow, I wondered. It's possible, Michael agreed. Let's test some combinations. We tried various possibilities: my grandfather's birthday, the apartment number, the building's construction date. Nothing worked. What about your birthday? Michael suggested. If he left this for you specifically. I entered my birth date. The keypad beeped, and a small green light illuminated. Something clicked in the living room wall. We hurried over to find a panel had slid open, revealing another hidden compartment, this one containing a more sophisticated safe with both a keyhole and a digital entry pad. This is it, I breathed. The brass key from my grandfather fit the lock perfectly. The digital pad still required a code, but we were one step closer. As Michael examined the safe, my phone buzzed with a text from Rachel, Axiom CEO, flying in tomorrow. Meeting scheduled with Richard. Be careful. Time was running out. Whatever my grandfather had hidden, others were closing in. As I showed Michael the text, we heard the apartment door open. Thomas stood there, but his friendly expression was gone, replaced by cold determination. Behind him stood Uncle Richard and 2 men I didn't recognize. I'm sorry, Miss Mitchell, Thomas said flatly. Family comes first. How much did they pay you? I asked, backing toward Michael. Enough, Thomas shrugged. Mr. Mitchell, they're by the safe. Uncle Richard smiled thinly. Thank you for doing the hard part, Casey. We'll take it from here. Michael moved subtly, positioning himself between me and the door. You're trespassing, he said calmly. We've already called building security. Thomas is building security, Richard replied. And he's been on our payroll for months monitoring Harold's apartment. Now step aside. The 2 unknown men moved forward menacingly. I glanced around desperately for an escape route, catching Michael's eye. He gave an almost imperceptible nod toward the kitchen. The research belongs to everyone, I said, stalling. That's what Grandpa believed. How naive, Richard sneered. Technology belongs to whoever controls it. Your grandfather never understood that. In one swift movement, Michael knocked over a floor lamp, creating momentary confusion. Run, he shouted. I bolted for the kitchen, as Michael blocked the men's path. Through the kitchen was a service door that connected to the building's back stairwell. I'd noticed it during my earlier searches. Behind me came shouts and the sound of a struggle. I wrenched open the service door just as one of Richard's men entered the kitchen. The stairwell was dimly lit and smelled of cleaning supplies. I raced down the stairs, hearing pursuit above me. At the 3rd floor, I exited into a hallway, hoping to lose them in the building's maze of corridors. Voices echoed from the stairwell. They'd seen which floor I'd exited on. I tried apartment doors, desperately finding them all locked. At the end of the hall was a maintenance closet. I slipped inside just as the stairwell door banged open. Footsteps passed my hiding place. "She must have gone down another level," a voice said. The footsteps receded. I waited several agonizing minutes before cautiously opening the door. The hallway was empty. I needed to find another way out and locate Michael. My phone vibrated a text from an unknown number. Service elevator. Basement. 5 minutes. M. Michael had escaped and found a way to contact me. Avoiding the main stairwell, I found a housekeeping cart near the elevator banks. The service elevator required a key, but the housekeeping cart had one attached to a large plastic tag. In the basement, Michael waited by a loading dock, his lip bleeding but otherwise intact. "Are you okay?" he asked urgently. "Fine. You?" "I've had worse." He gestured to a folder in his hand. I grabbed this from the safe before they got there. It was the only thing I could reach quickly. Inside were technical documents and what looked like patent applications, all bearing my grandfather's signature and the Project Prometheus heading. "We need to go," Michael said. "They'll figure out we're missing soon." We slipped out through the loading dock to where Michael had hidden his car a block away. As we drove off, I spotted Uncle Richard outside the Westmore, speaking frantically into his phone. "They didn't get everything I said examining the documents. But neither did we." "At least we know what we're dealing with now," Michael replied. "And we have proof of your grandfather's work." What we didn't know was that Thomas had placed a tracking device in the folder, leading Richard's men straight to Rachel's house where we were headed. "We can't keep running," I said, pacing Rachel's living room later that night. "They'll just keep coming." Rachel, examining the documents Michael had rescued, nodded grimly. "Harold's research is even more revolutionary than I thought. These specifications would transform energy storage completely, which explains everyone's desperation to control it," Michael added, applying ice to his swollen lip. I stopped pacing, an idea forming. "So let's give them what they want, or at least let them think we are." They both looked at me questioningly. "My family thinks I'm naive and out of my depth, right? Let's use that. Feed them partial information, just enough to seem credible." Michael caught on immediately. "A diversion, while they chase false leads. We find the real prize," I finished. Rachel looked skeptical. "Your uncle is no fool, Casey." "No, but he's arrogant," I countered. "And desperate. Both make people careless." Over the next hour we formulated a plan. I would contact Brandon, who we knew was feeding information back to Pamela and Richard. I'd hint that I'd found something important in my grandfather's old vacation cabin, a property not mentioned in the will because it had been sold years ago. "Are you sure Brandon will take the bait?" Rachel asked. "He's the weak link," I explained. "Eager to please but not as committed to their schemes as Stephanie. He'll pass along the information without scrutinizing it too closely." The next morning I called Brandon from a secure line Michael had set up. "Casey," he sounded surprised. "Where are you? Everyone's worried." "Really? Is that why Uncle Richard hired men to chase me through the Westmore yesterday?" "What? I don't know anything about that," Brandon stammered. "Things have gotten out of hand. Mom and Uncle Richard are just—" "Save it," I interrupted. "I know you've been feeding them information all along." Silence fell. Then quietly, "What do you want?" "Information. What's Richard planning with Axiom Energy?" Brandon hesitated. "A partnership deal. Grandpa's research in exchange for a bailout of Mitchell Innovations and executive positions for both of them." "When?" "Tomorrow. The Axiom CEO is flying in for a final meeting." I took a deep breath. "I found something, Brandon. Not everything, but something important. Coordinates. GPS locations in Grandpa's fishing cabin. The one in Vermont that was sold years ago. The new owners are friends of mine," I lied smoothly. "They let me look around. The coordinates were hidden under a loose floorboard. I think they lead to whatever Grandpa was protecting." "What are the coordinates?" Brandon asked eagerly. I gave him a set of numbers Michael had prepared, leading to an abandoned industrial site that would seem plausible but yield nothing. "Casey, just come home," Brandon pleaded. We can work this out as a family. Like you worked it out with Grandpa, declaring him incompetent and locking him away. Another silence. That wasn't my idea. But you went along with it, I said coldly. Just like you're going along with this. After hanging up, I turned to Michael and Rachel. He took the bait. Now we need to move quickly. While my family pursued the false lead, we would return to the apartment for one last attempt at the safe. Michael had been analyzing the security system and believed the combination might be connected to the Project Prometheus research itself. Look at these equations, he explained, pointing to the documents we'd recovered. There's a recurring numerical sequence that appears to be significant to the technology. We decided to try these numbers on the safe's digital pad. That evening, disguised with hats and sunglasses, we slipped into the Westmore through a service entrance Michael had identified during our escape. Using a security keycard he'd cloned from Thomas's, we reached the 5th floor undetected. At the apartment, we found the door locked but not guarded, confirmation that our diversion was working. They're probably all chasing wild geese in Vermont, Rachel whispered as Michael picked the lock. Inside, we headed straight for the hidden safe. Michael entered the sequence from the documents, 31475926. Nothing happened. It could be a variation, Rachel suggested. Try reversing it. Michael entered 26594731. The safe remained locked. I stared at the pad, thinking about my grandfather, his meticulous mind, his love of puzzles. He wouldn't use something purely technical, I realized. It would be personal too, like what Michael asked. I entered a new combination, 07161993. My birth month and day, followed by the year Mitchell Innovations was founded. The safe beeped and the door swung open. Inside lay a weathered leather portfolio and a small metal box. I opened the portfolio, first finding complete technical specifications, patent applications, and a USB drive. This is it, Rachel breathed, examining one document. The complete Project Prometheus research. The metal box contained a smaller electronic device about the size of a credit card but thicker. A prototype, Michael guessed. At the bottom of the safe was a sealed envelope addressed to me in my grandfather's handwriting. Inside was a video message, a small memory card labeled for Casey. We were so absorbed in our discovery that we didn't hear the apartment door open. The first warning came as a floorboard creaked behind us. Step away from the safe. We turned to find Thomas and one of Richard's men standing in the doorway. Thomas held a stun gun. Your cousin wasn't as gullible as you hoped, Thomas said. He checked the coordinates before sharing them. Brandon actually did something smart, I couldn't help asking. Not Brandon, Thomas smirked. Stephanie. She's the one who figured out your little diversion. I should have known. Stephanie had always been the cleverer of my cousins, her vapid social media persona a carefully crafted disguise. Mr. Mitchell and the Axiom representatives are on their way, Thomas continued. They'll be very interested in what you found. Michael tensed beside me, clearly calculating whether he could overpower them. Thomas noticed. I wouldn't, he warned, raising the stun gun. Just sit tight. This will all be over soon. You realize what you're doing? Rachel asked him. This technology could change millions of lives. Instead, it will be suppressed to protect corporate profits. Thomas shrugged. Not my concern. I'm being well compensated. Subtly, I slipped the USB drive and memory card into my sock, keeping the bulkier documents and prototype visible. If we couldn't escape with everything, at least the most critical pieces might remain hidden. Minutes stretched like hours as we waited, seated on the living room sofa under guard. Finally, the door opened again. Uncle Richard entered, followed by Aunt Pamela and 3 men in expensive suits, Axiom executives presumably. Richard's face lit with triumph when he saw the portfolio and prototype. Well done, Casey. You've finally made yourself useful. Always glad to help family, I replied sarcastically. The oldest of the Axiom executives stepped forward. Is this everything, Mr. Mitchell? It appears to be, Richard replied, examining the portfolio. The complete Project Prometheus research, just as promised. And the prototype, the executive pressed. Richard held up the small electronic device. Right here. The executive nodded to his colleagues. We'll need to verify, of course. Of course, Richard agreed smoothly. But first I believe we discussed compensation arrangements. While they negotiated, I caught Michael's eye. He gave an almost imperceptible nod toward the hall behind us. He had a plan. Suddenly Rachel clutched her chest, gasping dramatically. My heart, my medication. Everyone turned to her. Michael used the distraction to reach into his pocket and press something. Seconds later, the apartment's lights went out, plunging us into darkness. Move, Michael hissed, grabbing my arm. We bolted for the kitchen service door, hearing shouts and confusion behind us. This time, instead of going down, we went up to the roof access Michael had identified on the building plans. The cool night air hit us as we emerged onto the rooftop. Now what? I gasped. Fire escape on the north side, Michael replied. Leads to the alley. Behind us, the roof access door banged open. 2 of the men were in pursuit. We ran across the rooftop, reaching the fire escape just as they spotted us. Michael went first, helping me onto the metal stairway. The rusty structure groaned under our weight. We descended as quickly as we dared, hearing our pursuers clanging above us. At the second floor, Michael guided me through a window he'd unlocked earlier as part of our contingency planning. We emerged into an empty apartment under renovation dust sheets covering the furniture. Moving swiftly through the darkened rooms, we reached the hallway and took the main elevator down to the lobby. Act normal, Michael whispered as the doors opened. Walk, don't run. We crossed the lobby with measured steps, nodding to a confused resident as if we belonged there. Outside, we hurried to where Rachel waited with a car engine running. Did you get it? She asked as we climbed in. I pulled the USB drive and memory card from my sock. The essentials. What about the other documents? The prototype. Richard has them, I admitted. But without the programming and authentication codes on this drive, they're useless. Rachel accelerated away from the Westmore. What about the video message from your grandfather? I held up the memory card. Safe. We'll view it when we're secure. In the rearview mirror, I saw Richard and the Axiom executives burst from the building, scanning the street frantically. We turned a corner and disappeared into the night. Where to now? Rachel asked. I have a friend with a cabin outside the city, Michael said. No one knows about it. We'll be safe there until we can plan our next move. As we drove away, I thought about the documents Richard had captured. They would soon discover they held incomplete research, enough to tantalize but not enough to replicate. My grandfather had been too clever to put all his eggs in one basket. The real question was, what did the personal message from my grandfather contain? And what did he want me to do with his revolutionary discovery? The cabin was rustic but secure, hidden at the end of a winding road in the mountains, 2 hours from the city. Solar panels provided limited electricity, enough to power a laptop and small appliances. No one knows about this place, I asked, as Michael unlocked the door. I bought it under an LLC, he explained. Used it for secure client meetings when necessary. The property records lead to a corporate shell with no connection to me. Inside was a single large room with a kitchenette, a wood stove, and simple furniture. A loft space above held sleeping areas. Home sweet home, Rachel said dryly, setting down her bag. At least until we figure out our next step. Michael set up his laptop on the small table. Let's see what's on that USB drive first. The drive contained hundreds of files, technical specifications, research notes, and complete patent applications for the Project Prometheus technology. Even to my untrained eye, the innovation was remarkable. A storage system that could hold massive amounts of energy in a stable form using commonly available materials. This could power entire cities with minimal environmental impact. Rachel marveled, scanning the documents. Harold was decades ahead of his time. And now my family wants to sell it to Axiom, who will bury it, I said bitterly. Not if we can help it, Michael replied, inserting the memory card with my grandfather's message. Let's hear what Harold has to say. The video opened with my grandfather sitting in his study at the mansion. He looked tired but clear-eyed, his familiar smile crinkling the corners of his eyes. "Casey, my little bird," he began. "If you're watching this, I'm gone and you've successfully followed my breadcrumb trail. Good girl. I always knew you were the clever one." Tears sprang to my eyes at hearing his voice again. "I'm recording this message in secret. My movements are monitored these days." His expression darkened momentarily. "Pamela and Richard think I don't notice the nurses reporting my every conversation, but they underestimate me. They always have." He shifted in his chair, leaning closer to the camera. "I need to explain why I've entrusted you with Project Prometheus. It's not just because you're my favorite, though. Don't tell the others that." He winked conspiratorially. "It's because you inherited your grandmother's moral compass. You understand that some things are more important than profit or power. This technology could transform how we power our world, Casey. It could bring affordable energy to millions who struggle without it. But in the wrong hands, it will be suppressed to protect existing power structures and profit margins." He paused, taking a sip of water. "I made a mistake years ago, compromising with the powers that wanted to control this technology. I told myself the commercial version I developed would eventually lead to the full implementation. But decades passed and the status quo remained firmly entrenched." Grandfather looked directly into the camera, his gaze intense. "The complete research is now yours. The USB contains everything needed to understand and implement Project Prometheus. The legal documents establish your ownership of all patents and intellectual property rights. I've structured it so that neither Mitchell Innovations nor my estate can claim control." He leaned back, looking suddenly weary. "As for what to do with it, that decision is yours. Release it to the world, partner with ethical manufacturers, donate it to humanitarian organizations, whatever you choose. I trust your judgment, Casey." His expression softened. "I'm sorry for the burden this places on you. And I'm sorry I couldn't protect you from the family fallout. Pamela never forgave me for loving your mother more than her. Elizabeth was my daughter-in-law, not my blood, but she understood me in ways Pamela never could. That jealousy poisoned Pamela, and she passed it to her children, though I have hopes Brandon might still find his way." I glanced at Rachel and Michael, who were watching intently. "There's one more thing," Grandfather continued, his tone growing urgent. "The prototype you found is merely a demonstration model. The real working prototype is hidden elsewhere, somewhere only you would think to look. Remember our Sunday adventures, your favorite hiding place?" My mind raced. Sunday adventures. We'd spent countless Sundays exploring the city when I was young, visiting museums, parks, and the boathouse, I whispered. My grandfather had owned a small boathouse on the lake outside the city. We'd spent many Sundays there, and I'd had a secret hiding spot under a loose floorboard where I'd keep treasures, pretty stones, special feathers, and once a tiny camera he'd given me for my 10th birthday. In the video, Grandfather checked his watch. "I need to wrap this up before they check on me. Remember, Casey, trust your instincts and be careful. Axiom Energy has been monitoring my activities for years. They may be watching you too." His expression softened into a gentle smile. "I love you, little bird. You have more strength than you know. Whatever you decide to do with Prometheus, I'm proud of you." The video ended, leaving us in silence. "The boathouse," Rachel finally said. "That's where the working prototype is hidden." I nodded, wiping away tears. "It's about 30 miles from here. We used to spend Sundays there when I was a kid." "Is it still in your grandfather's name?" Michael asked. "As far as I know. It wasn't mentioned in the will or any estate documents." Michael closed the laptop. "We should go tonight. Once Richard and Axiom realize what they have is incomplete, they'll be searching for anything connected to your grandfather." As Michael prepared the car, I studied the technical documents more carefully. The implications of my grandfather's work were staggering: energy storage that was efficient, inexpensive, and could be implemented using existing infrastructure. "Your grandfather was a visionary," Rachel said, joining me. "But he was also pragmatic. These designs include transition plans for current energy companies. He wasn't trying to destroy the industry, just transform it, which makes Axiom's determination to suppress it even more inexcusable, I replied. Power and profit are powerful motivators, Rachel said grimly. People like your uncle and the Axiom executives don't care about the greater good if it threatens their position. An hour later, we approached the boathouse with caution, using only moonlight to guide us down the overgrown path. The small wooden structure stood silhouetted against the lake, looking smaller than I remembered. Wait, Michael said, suddenly pulling us back into the shadows. We're not alone. Through the trees, we could make out a black SUV parked near the boathouse. 2 men stood guard outside. How did they know? I whispered. They're searching all properties connected to your grandfather, Rachel surmised. We need a diversion. Michael thought for a moment. I can trigger a disturbance at the far end of the lake. It should draw them away long enough for Casey to get inside. What kind of disturbance? Rachel asked skeptically. Michael pulled out a small device. Remote-controlled flares. I keep them for emergencies. Of course you do, I muttered it. The plan was simple. Michael would create the diversion while Rachel monitored the guards' movements. I would slip into the boathouse, retrieve the prototype, and we'd rendezvous back at the car. Minutes later, bright flares shot into the sky from the opposite shore, accompanied by loud popping noises. The guards immediately radioed for instructions, then jogged toward their vehicle. Now, Rachel whispered as the SUV pulled away. I sprinted to the boathouse, using the key I still kept on my keychain. Inside, moonlight filtered through dusty windows, illuminating the small space filled with fishing gear and old furniture draped in sheets. My hiding place had been beneath a window seat. I lifted the cushion and found the loose board exactly as I remembered. Underneath was a small metal box similar to the one from the apartment, safe but slightly larger. Inside lay a sleek device about the size of a paperback book, along with a handwritten note, the future for when the world is ready. Love, Grandpa. I secured the prototype in my jacket and was turning to leave when headlights swept across the windows. The SUV was returning. Ducking behind a stack of crates, I heard car doors slam and voices approaching. Check inside. Again a familiar voice ordered. Uncle Richard. The door swung open. Flashlight beams cut through the darkness as 2 men entered, followed by Richard. She's been here, Richard said confidently. Harold would have told her about this place. Search everything. I pressed deeper into the shadows, praying they wouldn't find my hiding spot. One guard began lifting cushions while the other checked storage cabinets. Sir, the first guard called, pointing to the open window seat. Something's been moved here. Richard hurried over, examining the loose floorboard. It was here, he said angrily. She's already taken it. She could still be nearby, the second guard suggested. Search the perimeter, Richard ordered. She couldn't have gotten far. As the guards exited, Richard remained inside, making a phone call. It's Richard. We were too late at the boathouse. Yes, I'm certain it was the working prototype. No, we haven't found her yet, but we will. The incomplete research is worthless without it. Yes, I understand the deal is contingent on delivering everything. He sounded desperate. Whatever arrangement he'd made with Axiom was clearly in jeopardy. The guards returned, reporting no sign of me. Richard swore under his breath. Expand the search. Check the road and neighboring properties. She's on foot, she can't have gone far. As they left, I remained frozen in my hiding place, the prototype pressed against my chest. Minutes passed before I dared move, slipping out through a rear window once the sound of the SUV faded. I found Rachel and Michael waiting anxiously at our rendezvous point. Did you get it? Michael asked as I approached. I patted my jacket. Yes, but Richard's here with his men. They're searching the area. We need to move, Rachel said urgently. Once they realize you escaped, they'll block the roads. We took a circuitous route back to the main road, avoiding the boathouse access path. Just as we reached Michael's car hidden a mile away, we heard vehicles approaching. Down, Michael hissed. We crouched in the underbrush as a convoy of 3 SUVs sped past Richard's vehicle, followed by 2 others with Axiom logos on the doors. They're bringing in reinforcements, Rachel observed grimly. This just got a lot more complicated. Back at the cabin, I examined the prototype more carefully. Unlike the demonstration model, this device hummed faintly when activated, a small display showing energy levels and output capacity. It's fully functional, Michael confirmed after running diagnostics. According to these readings, it's been continuously storing energy for over a decade. The efficiency is unbelievable. So what now? I asked. We have the complete research and the working prototype. But Richard and Axiom are hunting us, and my reputation is still in tatters. Rachel paced thoughtfully. We need leverage, something to neutralize the threat from your family and Axiom. What kind of leverage, I wondered. Information, Michael replied, his fingers flying over his keyboard. I've been analyzing the documents from the USB drive. There's correspondence here suggesting Axiom knew about this technology years ago and actively worked to suppress similar innovations. That's corporate espionage, Rachel noted. Possibly criminal activity. Exactly, Michael said. If we could prove Axiom conspired to bury renewable energy advancements for profit, it would destroy their reputation and stock value, I finished. But would it be enough to stop them? Combined with the patent documentation establishing your ownership, Rachel added, it might be enough to force a renegotiation on your terms. As we formulated a plan, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. We have Rachel's house. Files scattered. Coming for you next. B. Brandon, Michael guessed, reading over my shoulder. Warning us, I confirmed. But how did he get this number? Michael grabbed his laptop. Your burner phone might be compromised. They could have tracking software. We need to move, Rachel said, already gathering essentials. If they tracked the phone, they could be on their way here now. We packed quickly, destroying the burner phone and preparing to abandon the cabin. But as Michael opened the door, headlights swept up the driveway. Too late, he said grimly. They're here. Back door, Michael whispered, leading us through the kitchen. Outside voices approached from the front of the cabin. We slipped into the surrounding woods, but a shout indicated we'd been spotted. Run, Rachel urged. We sprinted through the trees, the uneven ground and darkness making progress difficult. Behind us, flashlight beams bounced through the forest as our pursuers gave chase. Split up, Michael suggested. I'll draw them away. Rachel, take the car keys. There's another vehicle hidden a half-mile east, an old Jeep. Get Casey and the prototype to safety. Before I could protest, he veered right, deliberately making noise to attract attention. Several flashlights followed his path. Rachel guided me east through the dense undergrowth. We'd gone perhaps a quarter mile when a figure stepped into our path. Hello, Casey. Aunt Pamela stood before us, oddly composed in her designer pantsuit despite the wilderness setting. Behind her, Uncle Richard emerged from the trees, followed by two Axiom security personnel. Family reunion in the woods, I said, trying to sound calmer than I felt. How did you find us? Brandon has been quite helpful, though not in the way he intended, Richard replied smugly. His warning text contained a tracking link. Primitive but effective. I silently cursed my cousin's well-meaning but amateur attempt to help. Where's the prototype? Pamela demanded. Safe? I answered. Along with the complete research and patent documentation establishing my ownership. Richard stepped forward. This childish game has gone on long enough, Casey. You're out of your depth. The technology your grandfather developed isn't meant for someone like you. Someone like me, I repeated. You mean someone with integrity? Someone who won't sell it to the highest bidder to maintain their lifestyle? Pamela's perfectly composed face tightened with anger. You have no idea what you're talking about. You think this is about money, about lifestyle. Isn't it? I challenged. It's about legacy, she hissed. My father's legacy. Harold Mitchell's groundbreaking work belongs to Mitchell Innovations, the company he built, the company I've dedicated my life to preserving. Not to some photographer who can barely manage her own rent payments. The raw bitterness in her voice surprised me. This wasn't just about greed, it was about something deeper. Your grandfather chose me to run his company, Pamela continued. Me, his daughter, his blood. Then he handcuffed me with that inferior technology, keeping the real breakthrough to himself. Do you know what that's like? To know your own father doesn't trust you with his greatest achievement. So this is revenge, I asked. Selling his life's work to a conglomerate that will bury it forever. It's survival, Richard interjected. Mitchell Innovations needs capital to continue operations. The partnership with Axiom ensures the company's future and our position within it, while condemning millions to continued energy poverty, Rachel said quietly. Harold wanted this technology available to everyone, not locked away to protect corporate profits. One of the Axiom men stepped forward. Enough discussion. Where is the prototype, Miss Mitchell? Not here, I bluffed. And you'll never find it without me. We don't need to find it, Richard said coldly. We just need you to tell us where it is. He nodded to the Axiom men who moved to seize us. Rachel, despite her age, reacted with surprising speed, delivering a precise strike that doubled one man over. I dove sideways, narrowly avoiding the second man's grasp. In the chaos that followed, I heard a new voice call out, "Stop! Everyone just stop!" Stephanie emerged from the trees, breathing heavily from exertion. Behind her came Brandon, looking miserable. "This has gone too far," Stephanie announced. "Uncle Richard, tell them to back off." Richard glared at his niece. "Stay out of this, Stephanie. This doesn't concern you." "Doesn't concern me," she repeated incredulously. "You and Mom are about to commit corporate espionage, possibly kidnapping, and who knows what else, all in the family name. It absolutely concerns me." I stared at my cousin in shock. This was not the self-absorbed social media influencer I thought I knew. Stephanie, Pamela began in a warning tone. "No, Mom." Stephanie cut her off firmly. "I've watched you and Uncle Richard destroy this family with your obsession. You had Grandpa declared incompetent when he was perfectly sound. You've tried to do the same to Casey. You've lied, manipulated, and now you're resorting to threats. It stops now." Brandon moved to stand beside his sister. "She's right. This isn't who we are, or who we should be." Richard's face reddened with fury. "You ungrateful." "What children?" Stephanie challenged. "Is that what you were going to say? Because that's how you've always treated us, as children to be managed, not adults to be respected, just like you treated Grandpa in the end." The family drama might have continued indefinitely if not for the arrival of more figures through the trees, Michael accompanied by local sheriff's deputies. "These are the individuals I reported," Michael told the officers calmly. "Corporate espionage, attempted theft of intellectual property, and now apparent kidnapping attempts." "This is a family matter," Richard protested as a deputy approached him. "A misunderstanding." "Then you won't mind explaining it at the station," the deputy replied, unmoved. As the situation de-escalated under law enforcement supervision, I found myself face to face with Pamela. For the first time, I saw past her perfect facade to the wounded daughter beneath. "He loved you," I told her quietly. "Grandpa loved you, but he couldn't trust you with technology that could change the world when your vision was so limited." "Limited," she scoffed. "I built his company into what it is today." "Yes, but at what cost? You saw his work only as a means to profit and power. He wanted more for his legacy." She looked away, and for a moment I thought I saw tears in her eyes. "You don't understand what it was like growing up with Harold Mitchell as your father. Nothing was ever good enough." "Nothing. Maybe not," I conceded. "But that doesn't justify what you've done." As the deputies led Richard and the Axiom men away, Pamela seemed to deflate suddenly, looking her age. "What happens now?" she asked. "That depends on what you choose to do next," I replied. In the days that followed, the situation unfolded with dizzying speed. Michael's cybersecurity expertise uncovered communications proving Axiom had conspired to suppress multiple energy innovations over decades. When presented with this evidence, and the threat of a public relations nightmare, Axiom executives quickly backed away from their deal with Mitchell Innovations. Richard faced criminal charges for corporate espionage and attempted theft. Pamela avoided prosecution but was forced to step down as CEO of Mitchell Innovations. With the prototype and complete research secure, I faced the decision my grandfather had entrusted to me: what to do with Project Prometheus. After consulting with Rachel, Michael, and Dr. Foster, I chose a path I believed would honor my grandfather's wishes. I established the Harold Mitchell Foundation for Sustainable Energy, with a mission to develop and implement his breakthrough technology for the public good. Rather than seeking maximum profit, the foundation would license the technology affordably to manufacturers worldwide, with special provisions for developing nations. The patents would remain with the foundation, preventing any single entity from controlling or suppressing the innovation. To my surprise, Stephanie approached me with an offer to help. "I have a business degree and social media expertise," she pointed out. "Let me handle public relations and outreach." It's time I did something meaningful with my life, besides posting selfies. Brandon too sought redemption. "I was weak," he admitted. "I went along with Mom and Uncle Richard because it was easier than standing up to them. I want to make amends." I assigned him to work with Dr. Foster on educational initiatives, teaching young people about renewable energy. As for Mitchell Innovations, I proposed a restructuring that would integrate the company with the foundation's mission. The board eagerly accepted, recognizing the potential for growth in the sustainable energy sector. In a final unexpected twist, my reputation as a photographer flourished, as news of the energy breakthrough and family drama spread. Clients who had abandoned me returned with apologies and new opportunities emerged. But my focus remained on fulfilling my grandfather's vision. 6 months after that night in the woods, I stood in the renovated apartment at the Westmore, now the foundation's headquarters, surrounded by photographs of my grandfather and his work. The prototype sat in a display case, a testament to what one person's vision could achieve. Michael joined me now, both a trusted colleague and something more. Our shared experience had forged a connection neither of us had anticipated, but both welcomed. "Your grandfather would be proud," he said, slipping his hand into mine. "I hope so," I replied, gazing at Harold's smiling face in a photo taken decades earlier. "There's still so much work to do." "But the hardest part is done," Michael reminded me. "The technology is out there. It can't be suppressed again." Later that evening, as we prepared to leave, I found one last envelope that had been overlooked in the apartment's renovation, tucked behind a baseboard in what had been my grandfather's bedroom. Inside was a handwritten letter dated just weeks before his death. "My dear Casey, if you're reading this, you've successfully navigated the maze I left for you. I'm sorry for the burden, but I needed someone I could trust completely. There's something I never told you about your Aunt Pamela. As a child, she had the same spark, the same creativity you possess. But somewhere along the way, fear overcame her curiosity. She became focused on security, on proving herself, on accumulating the trappings of success, rather than pursuing true innovation. I failed her as a father. I pushed too hard, criticized too much, and eventually she stopped trying to impress me with ideas, and instead tried to impress me with profits and power. By the time I realized my mistake, the pattern was set. When your mother came into our lives, not as my daughter, but as my son's wife, I found someone who understood my vision in a way Pamela never could. The closer Elizabeth and I became, the more Pamela resented her. After your parents died and I took an interest in you, that resentment transferred to you as well. I tell you this not to excuse Pamela's actions, but to help you understand them. Generational wounds run deep in families. Mine contributed to hers, which she passed to her children. You have a chance to break that cycle, Casey. To build something new from the ashes of our family's mistakes. Prometheus gave humans fire, the power to create or destroy. You now hold a different kind of fire. Use it wisely, little bird. With love and faith in you, Grandpa Harold. I folded the letter carefully, understanding at last the complexity of the legacy I'd inherited, not just technology that could change the world, but the opportunity to heal a broken family. Looking out the window at the city lights, I thought about how my grandfather's question about the apartment had set everything in motion. Now I finally understood what he meant. It wasn't just about a physical space or hidden technology. It was about truth, integrity, and the future he trusted me to create. 1 year after discovering my grandfather's secret, I stood on a stage in front of hundreds of energy industry leaders, environmental advocates, and media representatives. Behind me, a massive screen displayed the Harold Mitchell Foundation logo, 3 interconnected circles, the same pattern that had been on the key. Grandpa pressed into my hand with his dying breath. Project Prometheus isn't just about revolutionary energy storage, I explained, my voice steady despite my racing heart. It's about democratizing access to clean, affordable energy for everyone. Today, I'm proud to announce our first implementation projects in 12 countries across 5 continents. The audience erupted in applause. In the front row sat Rachel and Michael, both now key foundation leaders. Beside them, Dr. Foster beamed with pride, finally seeing his and my grandfather's work reaching its intended purpose. After the presentation, as attendees networked over refreshments, I slipped away to a quiet corner. Running a global foundation hadn't been in my 5-year plan, but I'd discovered leadership abilities I never knew I possessed. My photography career continued on the side, documenting the foundation's projects around the world. Impressive speech coups. I turned to find Brandon approaching, looking healthier and more centered than I'd ever seen him. The rehabilitation program I'd helped him enter had transformed him. Now he managed the foundation's educational outreach, traveling to schools and universities to inspire the next generation of innovators. Thanks, I replied, genuinely pleased to see him. How was your trip to Brazil? Amazing. Those kids in the rural communities, they're so eager to learn. When we installed the first Prometheus unit at their school, giving them reliable electricity for the first time, their faces. He shook his head, emotion catching in his throat. Our relationship had evolved into something I never expected. A genuine friendship built on shared purpose and gradual forgiveness. Brandon had been the first family member to truly acknowledge the harm they'd caused. Grandpa and me, and his remorse was sincere. Any word from your mom? I asked gently. Brandon's expression sobered. She's still at the retreat center in Arizona. The therapist says she's making progress. Coming to terms with her relationship with Grandpa is challenging. After the confrontation in the woods, Aunt Pamela had suffered what her doctors called a psychological break. The facade of perfect control she'd maintained for decades had finally shattered. Rather than prosecution, I'd arranged for her to receive psychological treatment at a private facility. And Stephanie, the Pierstead, inquired. Thriving. The foundation's social media presence has tripled under her management. She's found her calling, Casey. We both have. Speaking of Stephanie, I spotted her across the room, deep in conversation with potential partners from a major manufacturing firm. Gone were the designer clothes and affected mannerisms, replaced by professional attire and genuine enthusiasm as she explained the foundation's licensing model. She caught my eye and waved, excusing herself to join us. The Smithfield Group is in, she announced triumphantly. They want to manufacture Prometheus units for the European market. That's our 5th major manufacturer, Brandon noted. Exactly as scheduled in the 5-year plan. Uncle Richard must be kicking himself in his prison cell, Stephanie remarked. Richard had been sentenced to 3 years for corporate espionage. The evidence Michael uncovered had been too substantial to fight, especially after some Axiom executives turned state's evidence to save themselves. I don't think about Richard much these days, I admitted. There's too much important work ahead to dwell on the past. Later that evening, Michael and I returned to our home, a modest house we'd purchased together 6 months earlier. Our relationship had deepened naturally through our shared experience and values. Tonight we had something special to celebrate beyond the foundation's success. Have you told Rachel yet? He asked as we relaxed on the porch swing. Not yet, I replied, touching the small engagement ring on my finger. I wanted us to have a moment just for us before sharing the news. He smiled, taking my hand. Your grandfather would have approved, I think. He would have loved you, I agreed. Almost as much as I do. The following weekend, I made a pilgrimage I undertook monthly, a visit to the care facility where my grandfather had spent his final years. Not to see him, of course, but to meet with the director about the foundation's special project there. The Harold Mitchell Energy Independence Initiative is ahead of schedule, Director Collins reported as we toured the building. The solar array is complete, and the Prometheus storage units are installed. This facility will be completely off-grid and energy independent within a month. In the Residence Technology Access Program, I inquired. A tremendous success. Having reliable devices and internet connections has transformed their quality of life. The virtual reality systems are particularly popular, allows residents with mobility issues to travel and experience the outside world. This had been one of my first decisions as foundation head, ensuring that elder care facilities received priority access to Prometheus technology. No one should end their life isolated and controlled as my grandfather had been. As I prepared to leave, I stopped by the small memorial garden we'd established in Grandpa's honor. Sitting on a bench beneath a flowering dogwood tree, his favorite, I found an unexpected visitor. "I didn't know you came here," I said, surprised to see Stephanie. She looked up equally startled. I come every few weeks. Just to think." I sat beside her, both of us quiet for a moment. "I was awful to him," she finally said. "Treated him like he was senile when I knew he wasn't. Mom and Uncle Richard led the charge, but I went along with it. I even testified at the competency hearing." "You didn't know the whole story," I offered. "I didn't want to know," she corrected. It was easier to believe he was losing his mind than to question what Mom and Uncle Richard were doing. She sighed deeply. "The irony is, I actually liked Grandpa. He was the only one who ever saw past my social media persona. He saw people clearly," I agreed. "It was his gift. And his burden," Stephanie added. "Seeing potential and being disappointed when people didn't live up to it." On my way home, I stopped at the old Mitchell mansion, now transformed into the Foundation's research center. The family home my aunt and uncle had fought so desperately to control now bustled with scientists and engineers working to refine and expand Project Prometheus. In my grandfather's former study, I'd created a small museum documenting the technology's development. Photos, spanning 5 decades, showed Harold Mitchell's journey from young DARPA researcher to visionary entrepreneur. Alongside them now stood photographs of the Foundation's projects worldwide, his legacy continuing in ways he might never have imagined. I often wondered if he had foreseen how events would unfold. Had he known that entrusting me with Prometheus would not only revolutionize energy technology but also force a reckoning within our family? Had he anticipated that his final gift would heal as well as power? That evening, I added a new photograph to my personal collection, one that sat on my desk at home. It showed my grandfather in his younger days holding me as a toddler, both of us laughing in the sunshine. Beside it, I placed a new photo, the Foundation team, including Brandon and Stephanie, at our first project installation in a remote village. The 2 images, past and present, old family and new family, stood as testimony to the choice we all have to remain trapped in cycles of hurt and resentment, or to build something new and meaningful from the ashes of the past. Sometimes when working late at the Foundation offices, I swear, I can feel my grandfather's presence in the old apartment. Not haunting, but approving. His question about the apartment had set me on a journey I never expected, one that transformed not just my life, but potentially the world. Have you ever discovered a family secret that changed everything you thought you knew? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. And if this journey from betrayal to redemption touched you, please hit that like button and subscribe to my channel for more real-life stories of family drama and healing. Share with someone who might need to know they're not alone in navigating complex family dynamics. Remember, sometimes the greatest inheritance isn't what's in a will or a safe, it's the truth and what we choose to do with it. Thank you for joining me on this journey, and I'll see you in the next video.